So today we're exploring harmonizing with the natural world and expanding our awareness of our place in the universe. What is our place in the universe? Well, we must be very important because the supreme intelligence chose to create us. So we are really, really important. And in some ways, we may be a little bit self-centered, both as individuals and as a species, because yes, the supreme intelligence created us. However, even more important than that, we are part of the great universal whole. Isn't that wonderful? We're much more than we are just as our individual selves. We are important aspects, important players in the universe. So we're essential and we're part of the whole. We're connected with all of life. We're part of the web of life that includes all the plants and animals and oceans and mountains and stars and galaxies. The Native American chief Seattle said, "Humankind has not woven the web of life. We are but one thread within it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. All things are bound together. All things connect." And this reminds me of Indra's net that's so important in Hinduism and Buddhism. Let me share a definition of Indra's net. It symbolizes the universe as a web of connections and interdependencies among all its members, wherein every member is both a manifestation of the whole and inseparable from the whole. We're fractals. At each node of the net, which stretches infinitely in all directions, are beautiful jewels, which are arranged so that every jewel reflects all the other jewels. No jewel exists by itself independently of the rest. Everything is related to everything else. Nothing is isolated. Each jewel is perfectly clear and reflects all the other jewels in a net. The way two mirrors, when placed opposite each other, will reflect an image forever. One mirror reflects the other one, and then that one reflects the first mirror within it to infinity. Now, a few weeks ago, I shared in a presentation on ecological consciousness an experience that I had as part of the Rosicrucian First Temple Degree initiation. And this initiation is always presented in two parts. And the first part was presented on a Saturday evening, and the second part was on a Sunday morning. I was living in St. Louis at the time, and the St. Louis Lodge scheduled it so that the initiation took place at the time of the full moon. And at the end of the first part, I went home, and we're expected to observe silence and to go within. And when I got home, my dogs were expecting to have a walk. So in silence, I took them to a nearby park that allows dogs, and they were playing, and I just sat on this huge rock and just went within, and I had an experience where I attuned with the moon, the energy of the moon, so deeply that I experienced another plane of consciousness. And I was the moon, and I was the trees and the stars and my dogs, and I was part of everything. And this was a profound experience, really a transformative experience for me. And I know that many of us have had experiences like this and have been able to communicate with other species. I know many of you are just waiting for your dog or your cat to say his or her first word. And I can say that I once had a greyhound, my beloved greyhound Grace, who said a word. She actually said a word. She and I were lying on the couch, which tells you how spoiled she was. And she stretched out one of her bony legs and she poked me. And I said, ow, and I exaggerated it. And Grace looked me right in the eye and went, ow. And I have a witness to that. So I know that animals can speak, and I know exactly what she was saying. She was making fun of me. And trees can communicate with us too, and with each other. Julian Johnson is going to be presenting more information on that in a little while. Trees may not use words like Grace did, but I know several trees that even have Grace beat. In the late 1990s, I was very involved as a volunteer with the Rosicrucian Order, then in San Jose. I'd moved to San Jose by then. And we decided to hold one of our regional committee meetings at a nearby state park. One of the members who was very involved, Fred McPherson, was a volunteer naturalist at this park. And while we were there, we had a regular meeting and we enjoyed being among the redwoods in this state park. And Fred invited me to place my head on a nearby redwood tree. And when I did this, I had an amazing experience. Suddenly, on the screen of my mind, there were scrolling symbols. And they were kind of like Egyptian hieroglyphs, but they weren't hieroglyphs. And they were kind of like the Hebrew letters, but they weren't the Hebrew alphabet. These were other symbols that, with my eyes closed, were just scrolling in my mind's eye. And when I removed my forehead from the tree, I just was stunned. And Fred was standing there, he had this huge smile on his face. I don't think he knew I would have that experience, but for some reason he invited me to attune with this redwood tree. And I don't know exactly what happened. However, I feel that something was downloaded to me. And this manifested in many ways. After this experience, I had other experiences with trees where I felt this really close connection and felt a communication. And I feel that these experiences helped guide some of the many projects that we've had at Rosicrucian Park. Shortly after the experience with the redwood tree at the regional committee meeting, I was asked to serve as the Grand Master of the English Grand Lodge for the Americas. And we have a very strong commitment to a sustainable use of resources at Rosicrucian Park. And we serve as a model for the community. And this is all based on the Rosicrucian principles. So we've done things like we replaced all of our very water-hungry lawns with plants that are native to Northern California, including many that attract pollinators. And when we did this, we have since that time, and this we replaced the lawns in 2005. Since then, we have saved 10 million gallons of water per year because we are able to, the plants are able to sustain themselves through the natural rainfall in Northern California. And we were using 10 million gallons of water per year to water the lawns before that. And in addition to the savings to the environment, that has resulted in a financial savings of over $842,000 since 2005. And the savings increase every year because the price of water goes up. We've also achieved net zero carbon energy status, which means that at Rosicrucian Park now, we are able to generate enough energy for our consumption needs. And the return on investment will occur after 13 years, and this was 3 years ago. So in 10 years, we will have entirely paid off this project where we completely are self-sustainable with our energy. And we were paying $8,000 per month for our utilities. And now that $8,000 per month goes to pay for that project. And in 10 years, that will just be $8,000 a month that we can use for other important projects. We also harvest rainwater from several roofs into some hidden storage tanks that contain about 35,000 gallons of water that we use in the summer for irrigation. Since 2015, when we converted to online monographs only and made all of our publications available online, since then we have already saved in those 5 years 3,200 trees, 3,200 trees. And I did a calculation on this on how many acres that converts to. And in North Carolina, they suggest 40 to 50 trees per acre if you're replanting. And in Oregon, which has reforestation laws, they say you can put as many as 100 trees per acre. So we'll use that higher figure. And that means that every 5 years, we are saving 32 acres of trees. And that converts to one fully forested Rosicrucian park every year by converting to online publications. I believe somewhere in my consciousness, that experience that I had with the redwood tree influenced these projects that we had at Rosicrucian Park. Now, for millennia, shamans and other mystics have communicated with trees. So why wouldn't plants be able to communicate with us? We co-evolved together. We share about 25% of our DNA with plants. We had a common ancestor, and then 1.5 billion years ago, we went different directions, but we still share 25% of our genes with plants. H. Spencer Lewis wrote about attuning with plants in a book called Lemuria, which was written under his pen name, Wishar Survey. And he described a deeply holistic way of communicating that included being able to communicate with plants and animals and other people through thought transference. He stated that the Lemurians obtained their knowledge through the observation of nature, and they developed an ability and an organ in the center of their forehead that allowed them, through mental telepathy, to communicate with animals, plants, and other Lemurians. He also said it's quite likely that this organ had an equal to or some way connected to the present pituitary body in us today. And we're going to practice a meditation associated with that in a little while. The vowel sound that stimulates the pituitary center, again, it's in the center of our head at the level between our eyes. The vowel sounds are ra and ma. So how can we expand our awareness of our connection with other species? First of all, by observing them. Look into the eyes of a being of another species. Be touched by them. And of course, many of us have connections with our pets or with other animals who aren't pets, who we can connect with. So by interacting with them, we can also observe how plants in particular act. I've mentioned before that I was very fortunate to be introduced to the order by a woman named Emma Buford in St. Louis. And Emma and I became friends after I joined the order. And she came to my house once and she was sitting on a sofa across from where I was seated. So Emma and I were talking, and I noticed that my house plants seemed to be leaning toward Emma. It happened during the conversation. And I thought, well, that might just be my imagination. So the next time that Emma came to my house, I observed where my plants were, before we started our conversation, and sure enough, in a very short amount of time, my two houseplants that were right there next to the sofa started leaning toward Emma. And I know that they were attracted to her energy. Emma was a very charismatic person. She had a magnetic personality, and I'm sure they were attracted to her just like so many people were. So we can observe other species to feel our connection with them. Also, we can observe our language. Leonard Schlein, MD, wrote a book called The Alphabet versus the Goddess. And he offers that the process of learning and using different alphabets changed our brains. It rewired the human brain, in many ways disconnecting us from our more holistic way of thinking. And when we started using alphabets, we became more linear and abstract. So when we pay attention to when we're using language and how we're using language, it can help expand our awareness because we're using that hemisphere of the brain, much like how H. Spencer Lewis described the Lemurians were able to communicate. Also, harmonizing with the natural world connects us with that more holistic experience. We can also expand our awareness of our relationship with other species by being aware of the language that we use and the attitudes that privilege human beings. Now, in religious texts, one of the most misunderstood and misinterpreted passages in the Bible is from Genesis 1:26, where God or the divine gives humankind dominion over nature and animals. And this has often been mistakenly interpreted as meaning ownership or domination, giving humans the right to treat animals however they want. However, since there was no violence in the paradise of the Garden of Eden, and since the divine described all creation as very good, it's much more reasonable to regard dominion as a sacred responsibility, to be good stewards of the natural world. Ellen Davis, PhD, who's a professor at Duke Divinity School, writes, quote, "A more satisfactory translation of that crucial verse might be, let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, so they may exercise skilled mastery with respect to the fish of the sea and the birds of the air." Also in Psalm 50, the divine says, quote, "All forest creatures are mine. So are the animals on 1,000 hills. I know all the birds in the mountains. Whatever moves in the fields is mine." So that seems pretty clear that when the divine speaks, the divine is saying that all creatures belong to the divine. We can also expand our awareness of our interconnection with other species by examining the laws of our country. In the United States, corporations have been granted personhood, which affords them rights, but not animals. So corporations have been granted personhood, but not animals. Stephen Wise, who is the lead attorney for the Non-Human Rights Project, says, quote, "Person is a legal term. A legal person is an entity that possesses one or more legal rights. You don't have to be a human being to be a legal person. For example, in the US, corporations are legal persons. Around the world, ships, religious idols, holy books have been recognized as legal persons. New Zealand has recognized a river, a national park, and a mountain as legal persons. In 2017, an Argentine judge recognized a chimpanzee named Cecilia as a legal person. And Cecilia is now living in a sanctuary. In 2018, the Colombian Amazon became a legal person. These are just a few examples. But in a US court of law, you cannot have one right unless you are considered a person. And currently, human beings are the only animals with legally recognized and enforceable rights in the United States. So what makes a person what makes one a person rather than a thing? Perhaps it's self-awareness. And self-awareness is the capacity to recognize yourself as an individual separate from the environment and other individuals. And there's a lot of evidence that shows that dolphins, whales, bonobos, gorillas, and orangutans can all distinguish and recognize themselves in a mirror. They know that they're self-aware. It's very touching to watch them do this, to recognize themselves. Just a reminder that in the United States, African American people, Native American people, children, and women used to be considered legal things too, not persons. And this is all related to harmonizing with nature and protecting the environment. We can't have climate change without sacrifice zones, areas that we value so little that we're willing to sacrifice them. And you can't have sacrifice zones without disposable people, plants, animals, and natural features. So who do we value? Who do we include in our conversations? When we discuss during the ecological consciousness discussion a few weeks ago, John Fowler introduced us to the Council of All Beings, which is a meditation where you invite other voices into our conversation. So we're going to do this now. We'll begin by intoning the vowel sounds ra and ma, which again will open our pituitary centers and stimulate them. And then we're going to consider what voices should be included in our conversations. So please sit comfortably, take 3 deep breaths. Now we're going to intone ra, ma 3 times. Ready? Inhale. Ra, ma. Ra. What more than human voices should be included in our conversation right now and in our vision for the future? And what do these more than human beings want us to hear? May we expand our awareness to include these voices in our conversations. So mote it be. We can also expand our awareness of our place in the universe by spending time in nature. The more we spend time in nature, the more we appreciate it and the more likely we are to protect it, to speak up for nature. Many of us have been staying at home recently, but even before then, sometimes I think a lot of us, we want to spend time in nature, but you know how it is. We get busy or we're tired or it's hot outside. And then days turn into weeks and weeks turn into months. And then we haven't spent any time in nature for a very long time. There is a name for this disconnection from nature. It's called nature deficit disorder. And a lot of people are studying this and how it affects us on all different levels, physically, emotionally, psychically, how it affects our society, our communities, especially the very strange ways in which we pollute the environment that sustains us. A few years ago, Stanford University released the results of a study of the value of spending time in nature. And they compared the results of someone who exercises in nature versus in a city setting or at the gym, which of course, that's great too. But the benefits are much greater when we exercise out in nature. It lowers our blood pressure more, better harmonizes our heart rate, decreases stress more. It also decreases activity in the part of the brain in which we ruminate. And we spoke about this once when we were exploring radiant health. When we're out in nature, the subgenual prefrontal cortex of our brain, the ruminator, becomes calm. So we don't just keep going over the same things over and over. And you may have felt this before where your challenges just seem to melt away when you're out in nature. The monographs tell us that our souls are inspired by the beauty of the natural world. In Japan, they have set up forests for forest bathing there. It's actually part of their healthcare system. They've set up 64 official forest therapy sites in Japan, where they found that slowly and mindfully walking through a forest is part of preventive health care. And it really helps to, again, lower our blood pressure, to harmonize our entire system when we interact with the forest in a meaningful way. Now, for those of you who have participated in our Wednesday Department of Instruction teleconferences that we present every Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Pacific time, you know that in April and May, we focused on radiant health. And I mentioned at that time that it's helpful, especially while many of us have been staying at home, to move our bodies so that we move the fascia within our bodies. And we're going to do this in a moment. Fascia is one of our richest sensory organs. It's a band or a sheet of connective tissue, which is mostly made of collagen. And it's kind of like our stuffing in our body, but it has a lot of nerves in it. So we have the bones with muscles and tendons and then organs and all the systems inside. And in between is this fascia that has all of these nerve endings. It has exteroceptors, which are related to the 5 senses, and it creates the peripheral container of our lives, where we begin and end. Then we have the proprioceptors, which is our sense of self-movement and body position. It's sometimes described as the 6th sense, and it gives us a sense of ourself in space. And then we have interoceptors, which is how we sense ourselves within our body, how we're doing on the inside. Are we okay? Are we experiencing pain or hunger or pleasurable touch? Am I okay? And this is a way that we connect our mind and body. And fascia research suggests that from your outer body positioning to your sense of your inner okayness, your awareness of being you is communicated via this fascia. It influences the boundaries of who we believe we are. So now we're going to experiencing being aware of our body, where we are, how we're feeling, and how far our sense of self can extend, expanding of our awareness of our place in the universe. So we're going to move to a piece of music called Spiegel im Spiegel, which is written by Arvo Pärt, and Spiegel im Spiegel means mirror in the mirror. And recently, as a hobby, I make mosaics. And recently, I made a mirror, and I was playing Spiegel im Spiegel while I was laying down the tiles. And I began thinking about the ancient Egyptians and how they viewed the mirror in their society. The word in ancient Egyptian for mirror is ankh, and that's the same word that they use for life, you know, the symbol with the cross and the loop at the top. So some Egyptologists say that when the Egyptians, they often made a mirror in the shape of an ankh. And they said this is because they were creating a pun. It'd be an ankh-ankh. And that always seemed interesting to me because it didn't seem like the Egyptians would make a pun about something that they revered so much, like the symbol for life. And the mirror usually had the face of Hathor on it, the goddess of love and music, and she took care of all life on earth and joy and dancing. And as I was creating this mirror mosaic, listening to Spiegel im Spiegel, I thought, no, this is the goddess, the divine, reflecting upon herself in the mirror. You know, in the Rosicrucian monographs, it says the purpose of all life is to serve as a mirror in which the divine untiringly contemplates itself. So when the ancient Egyptians held up a mirror with the life symbol on it, and with Hathor, the goddess who created and takes care of all life on earth, is right there, she's looking at us and we're looking at her. It's the mirror in the mirror in the mirror. It's the Spiegel im Spiegel. It's Indra's net reflecting forever. So that's the piece of music that we're going to move to today. And I realized this was part of my initiation into the first temple degree initiation, when I realized that all life is connected and that there are no sacrifice zones or disposable people or plants or animals or natural features. Everything and everyone is sacred and connected. Now we're going to move. You may want to play Spiegel im Spiegel while I speak. Please stand. Take 3 deep breaths, becoming more relaxed with each exhalation. Now focus on your feet. Move your right foot slightly forward and roll your foot along the edges of your right foot very slowly. Now the other way. Back to center. Now move your left foot forward and roll your foot along the edges of your left foot. Now the other way. And back to center. Now move your awareness up into your ankles and your legs and your hips. Gently move your hips in a circle, very, very slowly. Now the other direction. Now move your awareness up along your spine, feeling all the tiny muscles along your spine. Now cross both arms in front of you and bring them above your head. With both arms up, reach slightly with one hand and then the other. Do that again. Reach slightly with one hand and then the other. Bring your arms down. Now reach your right arm across your body towards the left. Turn your face the other direction. Look around in this direction and nod yes. Return to center. Now reach your left arm across your body toward the right. Turn your face the other way. Look in this direction and nod yes. Now back to center. Gently place your chin on your chest and slowly move your face up to the right and then to the left. Back to center and lift your head. Now cross your arms in front of you and bring them above your head. Now bring them down to the side. Place your hands on your heart center. Check in with yourself. What is your sense of yourself in this moment? Drop your hands. Now take your right arm up to the side, taking your arm all the way up and slowly and softly arcing over. Back to center. And now the other arm. Reach out to the side. Now take your arm up and softly arc over. Back to center. Now, place your fingertips on your chest. Feel your feet and below your feet into earth, deeper and deeper. Now move your right elbow forward and the left elbow back. Open your arms. Reach toward the screen. Now drop your arms. Again, place your fingertips on your chest. Feel the top of your head and above the top of your head. Move your left elbow forward and the right elbow back. Now extend your hands, one forward and one backward, and reach that hand in the front out your window, into the world. Reach to a tree, to the sky. Drop your arms. Now cross both arms in front of you. Take them above your head. So both hands are above your head, reaching into the world. Extend yourself into the world. To infinity. And everything in between and beyond, in space and time. Bring your hands back to your heart. Sway to the rhythm of you. All life is a mirror in which the divine untiringly contemplates its own reflection. The divine gazes upon its reflection, upon us, upon all life, and we gaze upon the reflection of the divine in every being. And the divine gazes, and so on, throughout all of life. Indra's net, the web of life. Each of us an infinity mirror, a mirror within a mirror, connecting all life in a web of dazzling beauty. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. Let us value the web. Let us value ourselves. So mote it be. You may drop your hands. Thank you.